And we're live. It is Friday, October 9th, 2020, 5:01 p.m. And Kate has a new salamander.
Oh, we weren't going to tell people about that.
We weren't?
I guess now I mean,
You
like,
know, it's
whatever.
part of
It's
the
like,
animal
I
collection
know.
meme going on in lieu of fun. We're apparently not going to talk about the salamander. Once again, our guest, Jack Balkin, who is unable to operate a webcam properly, is a disembodied voice. Hello, Jack Balkin. But in this
Was that
case,
Santa Claus?
since he's here
That was evil Santa Claus.
to talk about court packing,
Yeah.
first he's going to pack in lieu of fun because, in fact, we can spontaneously generate a Jack Balkin who, in fact, does know how to operate a webcam.
I do.
And it's good
I'm
to
here.
see you
And
in person.
I descended into the Ethernet, and then on the third day I rose. And I will return to judge those who have too much fun.
You sound like Antonin Scalia.
Very much. By the way, this is my fourth appearance on In Lieu of Fun.
Not appearance.
I'm sorry. This is my fourth
audio
Third appearance.
presence.
fourth audio presence, third visual appearance on In Lieu of Fun. I have sacrificed so much fun to you two. Really, I have.
Yeah, well,
But it's all worth it. It's all worth it.
And
at the
we
end of
are
the day.
grateful, as they say on Twitter.
Yeah.
So, we're not allowed to have fun anymore. We apparently are allowed to have repeated instances of Jack Balkin, so we do. We will resist the relentless temptation to make Balkanization jokes, because he's done that already.
He got rid of that. He did that himself. Like, when did you start that? 1998, your blog?
Oh, if only. 2003, January 2003.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it's old. It's significantly older than Lawfare, which and is
Just
one
had
of the
its 10-year anniversary.
Yeah, it's actually one of the sites that inspired key aspects of Lawfare. But there is something very important to talk about today, and that is court packing, since Jack Balkin has just packed Lawfare. And I use the provocative title, Jack Balkin Packs the Courts, because I'm a mischievous little monkey. In fact, Jack Balkin does not support court packing, except in a kind of weird sense. So
I'm doing the play-by-play as he talks. So you just think that's what's going on.
So give us the lowdown. What's your position on court packing?
I'm opposed to court packing the way it's usually described. But I have...
Wait, hold on. What is the way in which it's usually described? Just to lay the
That
ground.
is, you use the power of Congress to organize the Supreme Court, which is done many times, to add a sufficient number of justices until you feel comfortable thinking you have an ideological majority.
Now,
And the last time this was done was the New Deal.
Well, it was attempted in the New Deal.
Well, it was attempted in the New Deal. So
It was actually successfully done a couple of times, in 1863 and then again in 1868-69 during Reconstruction. Because remember, when Lincoln becomes president, the congressional Republicans want to give him some friends on the court. So they increase the seats from 9 to 10. Then when Johnson becomes president after Lincoln's assassination, they don't want him to have any appointments because he's a Union Democrat and basically not their friend. So they shrink the court to 7. By attrition, eventually it would get down to 7, but it didn't. And then when Grant is elected, they increase the court to 9 so that Grant can have 2 appointments. There are many interesting stories there, but basically it's to make paper money constitutional. That's the reason for the last successful court packing, so that you can all have paper money. I hope you're happy.
Which gives rise to Lincoln's...
We should have just held out for
probably apocryphal, but nonetheless immortal line. We should like to have a justice I'm doing this from memory. We should like to have a justice who will uphold what we did with the currency, but we must not ask a man what he will do on the court. And if we should ask, and if he should answer us, we should disdain him for it.
But we will have him greenbacks. We could give him greenbacks as long as we don't talk to him, right?
Exactly. It's a wonderful line. It should be true. Apparently, there's some doubt as to its provenance. So here's my question. There is a subtle variation of court packing, which exists only in the modern era, which is, hey, it's not a question of the ideological complexion. It's a question of McConnell having stolen essentially 2 seats. Nino Scalia dies, and he takes one position to steal the Scalia seat from President Obama, and then Justice Ginsburg dies, and he takes diametrically the opposite position in order to steal the seat from hypothetical President Biden. So the issue is not some arbitrary, we want ideological supremacy on the court. The issue is recompense for 2 seats that were filled by Republican presidents, supposedly illegitimately or through a muscular, stated more neutrally, through a muscular assertion of the power of the majority leader. We now have the power, assuming that we now do. We can do our own muscular assertion of power. We can't remove those justices. We can create seats. And so do you feel...
By the way, the ideological explanation and yours converge, because if the 2 people had been appointed by Trump were both David Souter, I suspect none of this would be going on. People wouldn't be. The people who would be complaining for more seats would be Republicans. Give us more seats.
But I don't buy that, because when David Souter was confirmed, people thought he was going to be something very different from what he was.
No, I know, but if they
and that's theoretically possible of Amy Coney Barrett too.
Yeah, no, but if it was David Souter as we know him, you see. So in other words, the reason for the objection is because of the ideology. It's partly because of the ability to pick, but the ability to pick matters because of ideology. Now, I have a different approach than this, which I would be happy to tell you about.
But before you get to your approach, just explain why you oppose this. Why shouldn't we have now we have Majority Leader Schumer. He's got 54 votes, say. 52 of them will support expanding the court. As you have just described, it has been done for naked, raw power reasons in the past. He's responding to, whether in your rubric or mine, he's responding to a very muscular assertion of power by the now minority leader. Why shouldn't he do it?
Well, it may come to that. It may be that's the only thing they can do, but there are disadvantages. So let me just say what the disadvantages are. The basic problem we have right now in our politics is that we have polarization like we haven't seen since the Civil War. And we have the parties are basically at each other's throats. And also, because the Republican Party is losing power, political power, it's trying to entrench itself in every possible way, which is the reason for these exercises of constitutional hardball. It would seem to me that the right thing to do, the right strategy, if one could do it, and if it served other interests, which I'll talk about in a second, would be to choose forms of court reform that would lower the stakes of judicial appointments. That is to say, to make the judiciary a less prized object, and to give both parties a sense that if they cooperate, they'll both get something that they can live with and something that's good for them. That is, it's to basically try to heal the very serious fractures in our country. Now, it may not be possible. That is, it may be a pipe dream. But if you can adopt a particular form of court reform that can move you in that direction, you should prefer that to a simple court packing. Because remember, what court packing does is just produce more life tenured justices. Whereas what I'm suggesting has a different effect.
So this is one of the things that I kind of want to hone in on, which is that there is this strange sense of ownership that gets placed on any given seat. So there's 9 seats, and they're like, oh, RBG has the right to be replaced with a like-minded justice or something like that. That's like the fair way to do it. But as you point out, we have polarized and become much more ideological in how we kind of have defined not only our own politics, but the politics of the court. And more than that, a lot of times, just as Ben kind of pointed out with Souter, you might get one type of justice or start with one type of justice you think is going to do this one thing and end up with this other. And this has nothing to do, like, I don't understand. I understand the normative reasons in the moment, the outcome reasons for wanting to pack the court. I do not understand the long-term outcome reasons for doing this and how it's not just going to extend the struggle and the political battles over the Supreme Court to X number more seats. Like we're going to get if in 20 years, we might have a Republican majority in the Senate and like a Republican president. And then like all of this will just switch the heck back. And so like, why is that? I just don't understand like the people that are arguing so vehemently for this right now. I just don't quite understand what they think is going on, but maybe they're happy in the short term. Is that what you think is going on, or they're not?
Well, I'm very sympathetic to the sense of injury and outrage. I just want to propose something slightly different. So let me talk about that now, if that's okay with you. So what I'm going to propose is something that has many people proposed it. It's my colleague Akhil Amar has proposed it. Crampton and Carrington proposed it. There are lots and lots of different versions of this, and the idea is, and I do bells and whistles for reasons we'll talk about in a second. The basic idea is this: every 2 years, on each odd-numbered year, so the first and third years of a presidential term, the president makes a nomination, and there's advice and consent. And there are bells and whistles for that we'll get back to in a second. So that starts to increase the number of justices. And you can see, soon it'll be over 9. But it's really important to understand that the Supreme Court has 2 different kinds of jurisdiction. It has what's called original jurisdiction, which is cases that begin in the Supreme Court. It has appellate jurisdiction, which is
very small.
Original is very small. Cases that are appealed to the court either through certiorari or direct appeal. Now, in Marbury, the court said that you can't mess around with original jurisdiction. But with respect to appellate jurisdiction, you can make exceptions and regulations. So my proposal is very simple. We constitute 2 en banc courts. The Supreme Court consists of 2 en banc courts: an en banc court of all the justices for original jurisdiction, and an en banc court for appellate jurisdiction consisting of the 9 most junior justices in service. So that means that the 9 who have been on the court the least amount of time are the en banc court for all appeals. What that means is every 2 years, the structure of the en banc court changes. It rotates as the oldest, most senior judge goes out and is put on the original jurisdiction court. And the 9 youngest, the 9 most junior, basically constitute the appellate court. The effect of that is that each party is guaranteed 2 appointments every year to handle the appeals, the most important things, the things everybody fights about, and can pick people that it thinks will be friendly to its values, its constitutional values. So all you have to do if you want influence over the Supreme Court is just win elections. There are no exceptions. It works like clockwork. If nobody gets shut out like Jimmy Carter, nobody gets a windfall like Warren Harding or like Donald Trump, really, who gets 3 instead of 2. And so basically it's regularized, and everybody knows the rules, and everybody does. And further, if somebody dies in the interim, the next most junior justice fills in. So if in the case of Scalia's death in 2016, I think the next most junior justice would have been Souter. Is that correct? Is that right, Ben?
Yes.
So he would have filled in until the next appointment in the first year of the presidential term.
No, but Souter wasn't there anymore.
But he's saying that Souter would be there. He wouldn't have retired. He would have gone basically senior status.
Right. So the point is that there would have been nothing McConnell could have done. He had no cards to play. And so all of the reason why he was able to do what he did was you didn't have any senior justices in reserve. So basically under this new system, you will. And if you have just moved out of the appellate panel, you're going to stick around for at least 2 or 4 years because there will be some cases in which your services will be required. Well, what if you decide to stay on longer than that? Very simple. Then you will hear cases involving original jurisdiction, which are one or two a year. And this is also really important from the standpoint of precedent, you will ride circuit, which the Supreme Court held in 1803 in Stewart versus Laird, you could be required to do. That is, it comes with being the commission of a Supreme Court justice.
That would be great for the backlog of cases that's in the current circuits.
So what that means is once you move out of the regular appellate panel, you are a circuit court judge, basically, in effect. You still have a commission as a Supreme Court justice, but you ride circuit. And that will then sort the wheat from the chaff. Some of the justices will love working on the appellate courts. They'll love it. They love law. They love deciding cases. They'll keep doing it, and they'll deal with the backlog of cases. Others are only in it to basically rule over us. The only reason they're there is because they want to tell us what the law is. And those will retire because they'd rather not spend the rest of their life being a circuit court judge. So you can see that the effect of this. Go ahead.
So in your, just so that I understand the proposal, in your system, there are essentially 18 Supreme Court justices. Is that right?
No. There are 9.
No.
There are 9 right now. There will be
infinite
10.
Amount of Supreme Court justices.
Yeah. Because they won't live forever. Most of them will retire when they realize they're never going to be on the appellate panel again. And the others will be very useful additions because they'll be circuit court judges, and for 2 cases a year, mostly about boundary disputes between the states, they will be part of the en banc panel.
So can I just I'm just going to reframe. I'm going to reframe it. So I think it was confusing because I think you blipped out for a second, Jack, or maybe it was my thing.
Yeah.
He's splitting the court into 2 different panels.
2 en banc panels.
2 en banc panels. One, which is 9 justices, which are the most recent appointed 9 justices, and they would hear appeals like the writ stuff that goes
the appellate jurisdiction.
Yes, and then the other that is literally every Supreme Court justice that is past the 9, including the 9.
No, all the justices, all the justices,
including the 9.
Yeah, and just like the Ninth Circuit. The Ninth Circuit. How many en banc judges are there on the Ninth Circuit?
28 or something.
Yeah,
a Ninth Circuit en banc thing. Everyone who's senior, basically, and then they also, the senior judges who are on the en banc original circuit jurisdiction would basically be required to go, and to whatever extent they wanted to, because they can pick their own kind of work schedule, they would be required to go and ride circuit and sit on other panels around the courts to relieve the courts of the backup. And
two additional things. And they can, if you want, they can help pick cases under certiorari. They just can't decide them. Secondly, the Chief Justice is always the administrative head of the judicial branch. So his job is just the same. And by the way, the Chief Justice's job now as administrative head of the judicial branch is like a full-time job. Yeah. So even if the Chief Justice wasn't on the en banc appellate court, he had plenty to do. The whole idea here is to reduce the stakes of judicial appointments, because when you appoint Judge Barrett, she is on 18 years. She can stay on longer, but she won't have the same power and the same consequence that she does in her first 18 years. So that means you choose a different group of people to be justices. You can choose older people. You can choose people with more experience. And it also means that both parties know that all they have to do is win the presidency. They're guaranteed 2 justices. Now, by the way, this is completely constitutional. It's Marbury and Stewart versus Laird.
No,
There's no doubt that you can do this.
Us of that. You don't have to convince us of that.
but I'm hung up on a couple things. A given justice is nominated and actually has appellate jurisdiction for 9 years. No, they have a commission to be a Supreme Court justice.
Forever.
That's what they're commissioned.
They have to be.
No, I understand. I'm just, but under the statutory,
for the first 18 years of their service, they will be among the 9 most junior in service.
Now, why did you say? Now, why 18 years? Why?
For the first 18 years that they serve, they will be among the 9 most junior in service, because you get a new appointment every 2 years.
Oh, a new appointment every 2 years.
Retirement after 18 years.
In every odd-numbered year. In every odd-numbered year, a president.
I see. Either you didn't say that or I didn't pick that up. So you have an appointment. You have an addition every 2 years. The Supreme Court could get very big if people like riding circuit. and hearing the occasional
Fine.
original jurisdiction case.
Fine. There's no problem. This is perfectly fine. It doesn't cause any problem. It's the Ninth Circuit handles a much larger en banc panel for cases. The question is, what can you do to lower the stakes of appointments? And what can you do with statute without constitutional amendment? Okay. Everybody still keeps their commission. They have life tenure. They get their salary. They still have all the honor of being a justice. This Chief Justice is still the head of the judicial branch. He's still the chief administrator of the judicial branch. The only thing that this does is to lower the stakes of appointments and regularize appointments. So it doesn't matter so much if somebody dies. We don't have this macabre system that occurs when Antonin Scalia passes away or Ruth Bader Ginsburg is in these terrible situations. She would have finished her 18 years sometime in the mid-aughts, right? She was appointed in 93, so add 18, so 2011, and then she could have been a road circuit, and if she thought her health didn't allow she would retire.
And it would guarantee that the appellate jurisdiction of the court was determined in a regular way. The composition of the appellate panel was a simple function of who'd won the most elections recently.
Exactly. That's the point.
So when did you come up with this idea and where did you write it? I have not seen this article.
Well, I think I sent you the blog post.
He did, but Ben is behind on his Ben.
Yeah, I don't like my email is a black hole.
Email, so
okay, it's on balkanization about a week ago. If you can look it up and put it in the chat
I will for everyone. That right now. I also have put it.
So let me give credit where credit's due. The idea of this is a system of rotation as opposed to packing, right? The idea of rotation is very old. People have had these ideas for 30 years.
Larry Silberman has been suggesting this for a long time.
My only additional bell and whistle is to make use of two of the oldest precedents of the Supreme Court, Stewart versus Laird and Marbury versus Madison. And by creating and hewing to Chief Justice Marshall's claim that you can't mess with original jurisdiction, but you can make exceptions and regulations for appellate jurisdiction. So I take him at his word, as we say, and so you design two en-banc panels. And there's no constitutional problem with organizing the Supreme Court into separate en-banc panels for original and appellate jurisdiction. So it can be done. It could be done tomorrow.
But that's not the part that I'm curious about. I have a more theoretical question, a historical question, which is is the idea of acknowledging the politicization of the Supreme Court and tailoring its jurisdiction and justice selection to that in keeping with an originalist understanding of Article 3 and because there has long been a tradition of the Supreme Court being a counter-majoritarian force against kind of what it is that Congress does or Congress seeks to do. And so do you think that it can still be for the good a counter-majoritarian force, or do you think that there is a risk here by making it quite so political on the nose, basically? Do you think that there's a risk here of compromising that?
So you've raised many different points. Let me take them separately. First of all, until about 1980, this was more or less how the system worked. That is, the political science says, basically a president will get a new appointment 1.8 to every 2.1 years. There's a famous article by Dahl of Yale University that basically pointed this out. And it's really in the 80s when the justices start living longer that this becomes a problem. Secondly, on the question of whether or not the system was designed to allow the various parties or factions to appoint judges that agreed with their views of the Constitution, this goes all the way back really to it goes back to the first contest between the Federalist Party and the Democratic Republicans, the fight in 1800.
I agree.
So this is the way it's always been. I'm just leaning into it and regularizing it. The third point is it is by now too late to imagine a judicial system in which the political branches do not have some influence on who is appointed. to the federal judiciary. This is basically a design feature of our system. Now, there are other systems that we could adopt which would require an amendment. So, for example, Germany has a very different system. In fact, most countries, most democracies have different systems for selecting judges, and some of them are really very admirable. But our system, that's why here I'm being an originalist, is one in which judges have influence over who sits in the federal judiciary and the Supreme Court. And then once you have regularized political parties right around the late 1790s, it becomes obvious that the political parties will care deeply about whether or not the members of the Supreme Court are ideologically allied or share the same larger view about the meaning of the Constitution that they do. So this is as originalist as apple pie. It goes all the way back to the beginning. And I think what we should do instead of fighting it is lean into it and make it regularized and predictable so that Mitch McConnell can't play fast and loose anymore. He won't be able to.
So I'm very sympathetic to a lot of this. I also think there are some implications that we should talk through. So first of all, the 18-year, whenever somebody talks about term limits for Supreme Court justices, usually in the context of constitutional amendment or in some kind of rotation system, they usually talk about the 18 years. So I think that's relatively uncontroversial. The part of the scheme that I think is controversial is the idea of separating essentially the certiorari jurisdiction from the original jurisdiction, because the Supreme Court does think of itself as one court, and you're effectively saying actually for jurisdictional purposes it's two courts. Now that's a mischievous idea. It's less radical. It's less radical than it sounds.
Yep.
In the sense that the Supreme Court used to have jurisdiction, appeal as of right jurisdiction from every district court or what would then call circuit courts in the country until, 1890 when the circuit courts of appeals are created.
Actually, it had very limited jurisdiction because remember, you don't get federal question jurisdiction till after the Civil War. Most of the cases are cases involving questions of state law. And there are a small number of constitutional issues. I think it's a mistake to say there are two Supreme Courts. There's only one Supreme Court. But the question is that the point is Congress has the power to regulate and make exceptions to the court's appellate jurisdiction. That's the key idea.
I understand. I think what it really reminds me of is the Israeli Supreme Court, not the German Constitutional Court. Because the Israeli Supreme Court is actually two courts, right? It is the Supreme Court of Israel, that is the appellate body for all of the different judicial entities that sit below it. It is also the High Court of Justice, which has original jurisdiction in the Israeli court's case over just about everything anyone can think of. And it's the court of first instance and for a whole lot of petitions. But those judicial concepts are quite separate, right? You'll see it referred to often as the Israeli Supreme Court sitting as the High Court of Justice, right? And so what you're saying is, like, separate these, when New York and New Jersey fight over who gets, not Staten Island, Liberty Island, separate that from the stuff that we really care about.
I should point out to you, by the way, that how the Supreme Court has decided many of those border disputes.
They appoint a special master.
Exactly.
And
don't get on a high
They don't actually do it themselves.
Yeah.
Wait, hold on. Just spell out for everyone what that means. Like they appoint a special master.
So, one might get on his high horse and say, oh, no, I insist that same justices sit on appellate and original jurisdiction. That's crazy. When you have an original jurisdiction case often involving boundary disputes, it's just handed off to a special master doesn't even have a commission as a Supreme Court justice. And the members of the Supreme Court often rubber stamp the special master's findings. So the idea that there's some magical idea that the exact same bodies have to decide original and appellate jurisdiction, that hasn't been true for a very long time. I think it's much,
No, so I totally buy that. So I want to, but right. I want to get to your policy ambition here. Is the goal that this would function as an 18-year term limit? Because in fact, no one is going to sit around after they've written the great landmark opinion in blah blah versus blah blah. No one's going to do the combination of Georgia versus Florida. And sitting on circuit court of appeals cases in ERISA matters.
It's actually a soft term limit. Let me explain why. If I'm just left the regular appellate review, I'm going to stick around for 2 or 4 years because somebody will accuse themselves and may be needed. So I probably won't retire 2 years later. I probably won't retire 4 years later. I may start thinking about retiring in year 5 or year 6. But if I really like deciding cases, I'm really into law. I really love law more than anything else. I'll stick around for a longer time, and I'll be giving the country a very significant service. So the idea is not a hard term.
No, I understand. But your expectation, I understand the earnest pitch that you're making here. But this isn't a congressional hearing where you're defending this proposal.
No, this is what I believe. This is what I believe.
No, I understand. But what you're really saying here, can I just pin you down on this? Yeah. Is that, in theory, somebody might do that. But in fact, it's a soft term limit because the number of people who are going to prefer to do that than to go to Salzburg and hang out at Yale Law School is really small.
Yeah, it's a soft term limit, and it's designed to be a soft term limit. That is, and it's the kind that you can have with statutes without a constitutional amendment. The idea is it's very difficult to imagine a constitutional amendment of this kind being passed, given our politics. But if you can do something that is about 90% equivalent through statute, that's what you should do. Now, 2 things. The Americans generally don't like the idea of court packing. They find it to be obnoxious, but they do like the idea of term limits. There's a great deal of public support. And this gives the public about 90% of what they want.
Can I just weigh in really quickly, which is I agree with everything. Well, I take note of everything that is kind of being tossed around here. But I want
Justice Clonic takes judicial notice.
She takes judicial notice.
Learn that from my parents. Anyways, I was going to say that there is basically that there's something really important that some kind of infrastructure things that this type of reform would suggest. And one of them, which is huge, given Oracle, Google v. Oracle, which was just heard this week, is that you would have probably by default younger justices sitting in those appellate court positions, hearing those cases that are coming up, right? So that's one thing, which is
they might be younger. They might
be younger, but they're you'd have to imagine that they're younger than that they're they're going to be more like Amy Coney Barrett than they're going to be like Sonia Sotomayor. They're just going to be a little bit younger. And the other thing I was going to suggest is that this is going to create this urgency around this pressing urgency, I feel of not that it isn't already there, but in terms of impact litigation that comes up to the courts and it gets brought before the courts and that people really try to get heard by the courts. You're going to try to pick your moment, and you're going to have you're going to have only a certain amount of time to bring that litigation. And it's going to be it's going to put a lot more weight on those decisions of writ. And I
just want to point out this was our system until about 1980. So that litigators had this
Well,
problem.
I was born in 1984, Jack. So what can
Yeah,
I do?
litigators. I remember 1980. Litigators had this problem through most of the country's history. It's not a new problem, but it will be more predictable. In fact, it'll be easier for litigators to plan because they'll know how the organization of the appellate panel will be how the appellate panel will be organized. So that's basically the model, and I'm hoping that somebody in the Senate Judiciary Committee is listening, because I think this is a way to solve a lot of problems, and also you can do it through ordinary statute. And once it's in place, it will give incentives for both parties to play fair, because they know they're going to get something if they win the presidency.
Yeah, I think that's fair.
All right. Michael Fromberger, the floor is yours.
So thank you. I read your proposal on the blog, and because I wanted to be prepared. And I am not a lawyer, so all of what I'm about to say is informed by just being sort of an amateur observing. But I thought you made
a software engineer, but he's very smart.
I think
a software engineer would understand the programming aspects of the proposal.
Yeah, I mean, the logic makes sense to me, and I actually thought you made a really good case. And in fact, I actually, now having heard you describe it further on the show, I'm even more convinced than I was previously.
Please write your senator. Please write your senator and tell them that you support this.
I will. And actually, there's some chance that our senators would actually care. And particularly for the appellate side of things, right, where there's a lot of, kind of response. But I kind of wonder, in this discussion about court packing, and I know you don't mean court packing in exactly the same way that everybody else does, I wonder, are we focusing too much on the Supreme Court itself? Because it seems like we've already gotten the lower federal courts thoroughly packed, in the sense that they have been filled with, with people of a particular ideological and partisan spin, perhaps with some degrees of qualification variation. And I wonder, has that ship kind of already sailed in some sense? The court packing has already happened. And at this point, the question is more what we do about it. Or if you don't think that that's actually the concern, do you think it might make sense for us to apply the same idea you proposed here in the context of SCOTUS to some of the other, like, say, the circuit courts?
So that's a great question. I'm glad you raised the lower federal courts. So one of the amusing things about the debates over court packing is that throughout the history of the country, when a new political party gains dominance, it generally increases the size of the lower federal courts. But people don't call it court packing. They just call it a judicial efficiency. But what happens is you'll get a new party that will increase the number of seats in the lower federal courts, will increase the number of appellate judgeships, and then begin to fill them. During the 19th century, often what they did is, as the country moved westward and there were more states, they created additional circuits. So now there are how many circuits? 11, right? Is that right? There were 11 when I clerked. There are 13 now. There were 11 when I clerked. So
you have 11 plus DC.
Right.
Absolutely. So it's 12, and the federal circuit.
I feel so shamed in my federal courts knowledge.
It depends how you count.
The point I'm trying to make is that the idea of building out the federal judiciary over time, and often for partisan reasons, is also as old as the country itself. And that I think one of the first things that the Democrats will probably do if they get power is they'll increase the number of trial judges, and they'll probably increase the number of circuit court judges, and they will explain this on the ground that there are just too many cases and more judges are necessary to decide these cases. And then the president, if the president's a Democrat, will then start appointing a bunch of judges that are more congenial to the president's constitutional vision. So what's funny is this is almost never called court packing, but in fact, that's what it is, and it's happened all the way throughout the history of our country.
All right, so I wanna pose a mischievous question to you, which is, there is another model for doing essentially the same thing that you're describing, which is the Roosevelt 1937 court packing plan, right, which was a pretty actually sophisticated piece of legislation. I may be getting the details of it wrong historically, but I think it said that basically for every justice over the age of 70, you create another seat. And then if justices retire, it shrinks down effectively.
Yeah, there were many versions of the court packing plan, but that's one of them. And actually, it's the one we should use to discuss because it's pretty clear.
Yeah, so my question is, like, so it has a really disreputable taint because,
Yeah.
it went down in ignominious defeat. I always thought it was a pretty sound piece of policy myself. Like if you just ignore, no, so if you ignore the, and I actually, I was started, I think I can say this now, without betraying a confidence. Because so I have spoken before about Stephen Williams on this show, my friend, the DC Circuit judge who recently died of COVID. But, early in our acquaintance, one of the things that Judge Williams said to me that just made me think, wow, this is a really interesting mind, was he said, read the 1937 court packing plan. It was a good piece of legislation. And it caused me to go back and read it and think, gosh, he's right. And one of the reasons I liked it is it's actually very similar in character to what you're describing, which is it does it by a different means. But it says, if judges live too long and hang out on the court too long, we're going to have a mechanism to make sure that there are regular appointments. We're going to have a mechanism to make sure there are regular appointments to the court and a regular infusion of new blood. And so my question is, if you can't have your version, are you okay with the 1937 court packing plan? Did we lose Jack? Wait, Kate, is it just me or did we lose Jack?
No, we totally lost Jack. Like he's gone.
Oh, he just vanished.
He's gone into the ether. We didn't plan this. And if we had planned it, he'd be making weird noises from off camera.
Yeah, it's okay. So we're gonna get him back.
Okay. Oh, he says, "Let me back in."
I'm gonna let him back in. I didn't kick him out or anything.
I don't know what happened.
Shit happens sometimes.
I mean, we also lost Tony Cava, so there's that. Tony Savant.
It's okay.
Like to say.
We're going to bring Tony Cava back, too, for his question.
Okay, so you're going to have to reframe that question so Jack can hear it. Jack says
I suspect Jack could... He is trying to reconnect. He can clearly hear us.
He says, I've accepted.
Yeah, so he'll be back in a second. There he is.
Jack!
So how much of my question didn't you hear?
You asked me what do I think of the original court packing plan. Now,
if you can't have your version...
Yeah, it's a little known fact. By the way, there are significant differences from my version. But it's a little known fact that the other part of the court packing plan, which applies to lower federal courts, has been the basic system ever since. That is the senior status system. It's been modified over the years, but basically it's the Roosevelt court packing plan. So the difference between his plan and this is that there's no guarantee that you're on the appellate court for 18 years. Whereas, his model, you could it'd be randomized, completely random how long you stay on the court. And it would also have the effect that the appellate panel, the appellate jurisdiction could have, 15 justices on it. So in fact, in practice, it's very different from what I'm suggesting. One of the things I'm interested in or concerned about is the fact that I think many Americans think that 9, even though it's not required in the Constitution, is a good number for the number of justices hearing the most important cases.
It is a good number. It's a perfect square. It's the square root of 81. I mean, there's a lot to recommend 9.
Yeah, but the point is...
The square root of 81. That's all you've got.
And the square of...
Oh no! I ruined it!
I blame you, Kate.
I know.
Hang on.
We're waiting.
I just want to say, that none of this
Thank God.
is my fault or Kate's fault. It really is just the Jack Balkin gremlin that does not.
He just texted me, "Let me in." I just have like a series of like texts from Jack that are like, "Let me in, let me in," like every 45 minutes.
I think it's like
which is a little weird for your past PhD advisor. Like it's just like I'm like, no, you let me in. I get to come in.
All right, let's see. He's accepted and connecting.
Okay.
Maybe do you think this may be a sign from God of disfavor of Jack's proposal?
What? I kind of like it. Do you not like it?
Tony Kava's nodding. he's like, you know, Jack did not make a sacrifice of a yearling bull to Zeus, and Zeus is sending back his disfavor. Meanwhile,
do you want to go? Do you want to go to one of the questions?
There he is.
Jack, hi, you're here. Jack,
can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Stay in this time.
Let's just go without visual. So I just want to say that I spoke to Zeus personally. I spoke to Zeus, and Zeus is a friend of mine. Yeah. And you're no Zeus.
And Ben Wittes, you're no Zeus. All right.
Can you put me off video? Put me off video, Ben.
Oh, now you want to be off video?
Yes.
All right.
Yeah, put me off video.
All right. Matthew, the floor is yours.
Hey, everybody. First time, long time. I'm still a little nervous to be on here, so please forgive any stumbles.
You know, dude, like, you can't be more fumbling than we've been today.
Challenge accepted.
I want to tell you something, by the way. It just occurred to me. The person who's knocking me off is Mitch McConnell.
Clearly.
I'll let him know.
Yeah. I just want to say, Jack, I have tried repeatedly to cut your video, and it is not cutting. So,
that's the opposite. Now I'm the whole screen. This is crazy.
Now you're the whole
Cut the video, less bandwidth.
Oh yeah,
Matthew, the floor is yours.
Cut the video, Jack.
All right, so there seems to be a lot of attention paid to Amy Coney Barrett's religious beliefs. Whether we go back to the Court of Appeals nomination where Dianne Feinstein said your dogma of your religion lives loudly in you. And New York Times has done a decent amount of reporting surrounding some of her religious beliefs and religious institutions that she's participated in. So I guess my question is, does this type of discourse have any room in judicial jurisprudence and stuff like that? Yeah.
Is it legit for Dianne Feinstein to be questioning her dogmatic commitments?
So I have a descriptive and a normative answer. My descriptive answer is that
Zeus did not want to hear his descriptive answer.
I'm so sad.
All right.
I'm like, I really am like loving this conversation. And
it's a great conversation.
I know. And I have so many things to say, and I'm like biting my tongue because I can badger him about it later. And so I don't want to like hog the screen. But Ben, by the way, your point about the Israeli Supreme Court was excellent. I texted you that, but I don't know if you've seen it yet. But like I know, but like I hadn't thought of that, but that's like it's actually a really apt thing. I'm just waiting for my last text from Jack says I spoke to Zeus, and now Tony is asking for help. So
Tony, you can talk.
I'm going to tell Jack.
Can you guys hear me? Actually,
yeah,
I can. We can now. I unmuted you. We can hear you.
Do you want me to talk?
Well, you said help. Why are you asking for help? Seems like Jack is the one who needs help.
Jack needs some serious help.
Tony!
I could go ahead and ask my question, but Jack, I wonder if Jack can hear it.
I'm pretty sure.
Do you want me to go ahead and ask?
I think he can hear you.
Okay,
Sure. Ask the question. Although I want to hear the Amy Coney.
I'm a non-lawyer, obviously, and it kind of strikes me that there's a bit of, and this is said with all due respect, seriously, I love you guys, but it
I'm
kind
a
of strikes me
non-lawyer
that there's
too.
kind of excellent. There's an elitist conversation going on here that there's this theoretical discussion about precedent and the old days and numbers of judges that isn't taking into account the fact that the positions held by ACB and Brett Kavanaugh and Neil Gorsuch are inherently unpopular and unsupported by the populace. And in fact, the Republicans want to install these people in judgeships because they can't, in fact, get any of these goals regarding abortion or the ACA or anything else for that matter accomplished legislatively. And in fact, they won't even admit they hold the positions. You know, they won't come right out and say, we are against abortion. We don't like the ACA. So it kind of strikes me that I guess that's about all I can say, is that it's all well and good to discuss these theoreticals, but the fact is that these judges and their positions and the party's positions render them unelectable if they were held, you know, publicly.
Now, by the way, can you hear me
I'm
now?
just wondering if we're kind of missing
good.
the reality in the discussion of the theoretical.
Good. So so Jack, did you hear Tony's question?
Tony's question was the fact that many of the people appointed to the courts would be unelectable.
Yeah, and that the elite conversation about their judicial views elides the fact that their substantive views are actually unpopular and people don't want them.
Which is a little bit a variant on my counter-majoritarian question.
Yeah. So I should point out.
So you have two questions on the table. Why don't you address them both, and then we'll give Pat Gunn the last question.
So one thing you should understand is that has not always been our system. That is, as I said before, there was often a back and forth between people sitting on the courts and being politicians. Earl Warren was a politician. Actually, the only person now on the court who has experience in politics, I think, is Clarence Thomas, because he was in the Reagan administration. So if you really would care about that, you could pick a different group of justices. The reason why justices are picked the way they are is because of the fact that politicians want them to carry water for them. That is, that far from being a counter-majoritarian institution, the federal judiciary, the Supreme Court, has often been a construction of American politics. So that if you don't like the Supreme Court we have, you should tell your representatives that you want different kinds of people appointed. But politicians basically constructed the judiciary to do their work for them. It is anything but a counter-majoritarian institution. It is a player in national politics.
What was your response to the Amy Coney Barrett question?
Well, did you hear me talk about Louis Brandeis?
No, I missed that.
You vanished in a puff of smoke.
There's a very sad. There's a positive and descriptive. Descriptively, there has been religion has been used against Supreme Court nominees from the very beginning. For a long time, it was very hard to get Catholic justices. When the first Jewish justice was nominated, Louis Brandeis, there was a terrible campaign against him, and so it's a very sad story. My normative view is that, in fact, you should focus on what their positions are likely to be, which means you should change the way you ask questions. Instead of trying to, the reason why people focus on religion is because certain things are just ruled out of bounds as things that you're allowed to ask judges. And judges think that they can refuse to answer questions, which they should have to answer. So instead, we look for things on, did you belong to this private club, or are you a member of this particular religious group? And so the result, I think, is not helpful. Judges should be asked whether or not how they feel about particular decisions of the Supreme Court, and they should not, in fact, be allowed to dodge. This should be held against them. There are ways of doing it that don't require you to say, I will rule this way or that way. And I think the general tendencies recently have been to just say nothing. To say nothing so that nothing comes out of the Supreme Court nomination system. I should also point out that the hearings for Supreme Court justice are a relatively new phenomenon. And they have devolved into something that's less than useless.
All right. Pat Gunn, you get the last question today.
So I put 2 questions on the chat. Which should I try and ask them both quickly and give them a choice, or is there one that
Pose
you
them
prefer?
both. Pose
Okay.
them both. We got time.
I'll talk quickly. So my first one is on your proposal. And my understanding of one of the features of the Supreme Court is that it represents a longer-term consensus over the values of society mixed with legal expertise. And so I'm curious whether your proposal risks making regular appointments more extreme by bringing them closer to the immediate. And there's the danger of lessening the value of experience in Supreme Court judges, because presumably as they have more experience thinking about it and working with the court, they would get better at it. And then my second question is, assuming that your proposal is either not going to happen, or it with the understanding that it at least wouldn't change everything. If the court is to be packed, when you think about it from a game theory perspective, we're facing a trade-off between either weakening the norms against shenanigans in dangerous ways by allowing the composition of the court to be decided by groups that are at least not strictly, it's not following the election, or if it's not to be packed, then we risk normalizing I'm sorry, I confused my own question a little bit. On one side, we risk the left being weak and allowing appointments to be stolen, and on the other side, we risk normalizing seat grabs that endanger destabilizing our government. And between these two, which is the worst threat to our norms and the possibility of returning to a normal order of the mix of cooperation and competition between the parties?
So you're asking me Scylla or Charybdis? Is that what you're asking me?
He's gone.
Yeah, well, there you are. So as to his first question, oh, by the way, in the feed, they pointed out that Elena Kagan has experience in the Clinton administration. I forgot to mention that.
And Roberts served in the Reagan White House counsel's office.
Oh, I forgot.
They're not in a political capacity. They're legal functionaries as opposed to
he was
slightly different. I mean, Clarence Thomas was a policymaker.
He was the head of an agency. I agree.
He was a policymaker. Actually, Sandra Day O'Connor had a political experience before she became a state judge. In answer to his other question, I just want to point out that I think that people are deceived by the last 30 years of Supreme Court appointments, where everybody has been a lower federal court judge. That is not the history of the United States Supreme Court through most of its existence. If you look at great Supreme Court justices, here are 2 of my heroes. One is Earl Warren. He was the reform governor of California before he became the Chief Justice. Another is
Jackson.
No, I could say that too.
Hugo Black.
But how about Hugo Black? Hugo Black's a great civil libertarian. His primary experience was as a New Dealer, a senator from Alabama. Then he went on the court. I think that we overestimate how important prior experience as a member of the lower federal judiciary is to doing the job of a Supreme Court justice. And I think that if, in fact, we return to some of the practices we had earlier in our history, I think we would have a better system.
I want to double down on that idea to close this out. Jack, what do you think about going back to the idea of not necessarily having people who have law degrees on the court? We used to have, there is no.
I'm for it.
Ben wants to be on the court.
This is an idea whose time has come. In fact, I think there should be a set-aside position for non-lawyer, fraudulent, self-important writers, and it should be called the Wittis seat.
Yeah, right.
That's
By the
good.
way, I'm sorry I won't. I'm sorry we're running out of time, but you'll have to invite me on again soon because I forgot to tell you the joke about the Lipschitz diamond, which I promised last time I was on. So,
maybe
all right, we have time. Do it.
No, I'm sorry. This is the only way. The only way I'll get back invited for a 5th time.
Yeah,
I'm part of this.
this and a new webcam, dude, for a better internet connection.
Yeah, my friend. This has been great. Thank you so much. It's been wonderful.
Pleasure to have you.
Jack,
So
it's a really elegant idea, and I love the piece, and I hope it gets it gets taken up into the conversation, because I think it really deserves to be there. And so thanks for coming on and talking about it.
It's a super interesting idea, and it's frankly much more compelling than simply adding seats. All right, so tomorrow we have a Just Us Day, and I'm hoping that Lauren Roberts comes back to discuss the matter she raised yesterday with Bart Gellman. So Lauren, if you're listening,
are you going to be at Cabin in the Woods?
No, I'm going to be here. I'm going to be here this weekend. So this is everyone's chance to break into the Cabin in the Woods.
Sorry, I didn't mean to do that.
Yeah, and Sunday we're gonna have is it my mystery guest week or yours? I think it's yours.
Oh shit. Okay.
All right.
Mystery guest, Kate.
No, I'm not gonna say, because you clearly don't know yet.
I know. I clearly don't know. We'll figure it out, and it's gonna be Hugo Black.
Yeah, it's gonna be Hugo Black, who's gonna be here, like Herman Cain, even though he's dead. All right, so that will the Just Us episode will be 22 hours and 58 minutes from now. And until then, KK,
we don't have fun anymore. But at least for the time being, we have not 8 justices on the Supreme Court.
Oh yeah, we have a recommendation for John Roush for Sunday. So if you want to do well,
it's funny because I just got him reviews back on his book.
Oh, so
and it's been a while, and he's so wonderful. I love him so much.
So maybe he should be our mystery guest. That'll be the poll for the day.
I'll argue my I'm sure he'd love that. That's every writer's dream, to argue the edits to their book over Crowdcast with like 1,000 people watching.
That's I think what we should do, because I've read now 4 chapters of his book,
and I've read 5 and 6.
So we could, I read the first 4, so we could do like a workshopping John's book.
4. Oh my God, I don't think he's gonna want to do that live. Would you want to do that live?
He probably will.
It's very good. It's very good. Do you think so? Okay.
Okay. Well, we're going to let the audience decide whether this is going to happen. John is doing well on the poll.
Wait, you can't pick the mystery guest. Okay, now I'm going to have to pretend.
No,
like
you
I
just don't announce what.
I just don't announce it. I'm just not saying.
You just don't say. You're just here. The audience is making its prediction.
I might make a counter-majoritarian decision and do what I want. So, yeah.
To the people who are recommending Julia Ioffe, Julia is still sick. She's got COVID. She is.
Really?
Yeah.
I didn't know that.
And she's been public about it, and
I missed it.
And I will be. I've been in touch with her. She's doing okay, and she knows that she is welcome on the show whenever she's feeling up to it.
Did I tell you that I confirmed Kathleen Belew for Tuesday? It's in
Excellent.
our calendar.
That's very exciting. But we shouldn't be planning the show for next week right now.
I know. I'm just like, I want.
That's for tomorrow.
Okay, we'll do it tomorrow.
All right, we are so far past the end.
Well,
hey, for those of you who haven't yet signed up for Lawfare Live, click that little button here.
It's really great. Margaret Taylor was on today.
Because we don't have fun anymore, but in lieu of fun, in addition to in lieu of fun, we have Lawfare Live. So sign up for it. Right there.
We're probably both pointing the wrong direction, aren't we?
No, okay, I'm pointing at it. You're pointing away from it.
No, I'm pointing